Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
Welcome to Weird Web Radio. I am your host, Lonnie Scott. This episode features John Beckett. John grew up in Tennessee with the woods right outside his back door. Wandering through them gave him some sense of connection to nature and to a certain god of the forest. John's a druid of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, and he's also a member of Arn Riocht Fane, also known as ADF. Locally, he serves as the coordinating officer of the Denton Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans, and he's the former vice president of CUUPS Continental. His blog, Under the Ancient Oaks, is part of the Pagan channel of the multi-faith website Pathos. John's been writing, speaking, teaching, and leading public rituals since 2003. John lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with his wife Kathy and their cat Sophie. As John says, blogging doesn't pay the bills, so he earns his keep as an engineer in his daily life. Now, I've personally been an avid reader of John's blog, and I highly recommend that you become one too if you're not already. John goes beyond your normal 101 material that's so prevalent in pagan writing. He asks the harder questions of how to live and challenges our worldview to have more meaning in our spiritual life. John is also the author of The Path of Paganism, an experience-based guide to modern pagan practice, new, out, and available in bookstores, online, and off everywhere. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, John. I'd like to welcome you to Weird Web Radio, and thank you very much for being here, sir.
It's an honor to be here.
Excellent. And for the listeners out there, like I say in the introduction, John is one of the very few pagan writers out there who goes beyond the 101 and asks harder questions about how we should live, how our worldview can shape our lives, and what we do about that as modern pagans. And, you know, I've been following your blog for, I want to say, at least 3 or 4 years, John, and your writings had a fair amount of impact on my own life. So again, I'm very humbled by your presence here on my show, and I want to thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to hear that. Writers want to be read, and writers especially want to be read by people who hear what they're saying. And so you're making me very happy right now.
Well, good. Here I am, an army of one. Well, let's take it all the way back and just start at the beginning. Since I've read your blog for a long time, I'm pretty familiar with some of the themes that pop up a lot in your writing. And one of the things that you cover quite a bit is how you had to break away from a fundamental Christian upbringing. So was it exactly in the midst of growing up in that fundamental Christian childhood, did you find your way to being a pagan and ultimately a druid?
Boy, that's a long story.
That's fine.
And it was a long journey. It really was. I grew up in Tennessee, late 60s, early 70s. My parents attended a small fundamentalist Baptist church. They were good people. I don't want to give the impression these are hate-filled people or uneducated people or bad people in any way. They were good people, but they believed some very bad things. Early in my life, I accepted what I was told. I mean, my parents are telling me this. You know, this authority figure up there in the pulpit's telling this. Why would those people lie to me? Of course it must be true. The older I got, and the more I started thinking about what was being preached, the more trouble I began to have with it. How does a God who is supposedly a God of love, create this world and all these people, and oh, by the way, the vast majority of them are going to spend eternity in utter torment because they believed the wrong things. And not only did they believe the wrong things, most of them had no realistic chance to believe the right things because of where and when they were born. This bothered me. As a young child, 9, 10, 12 years old, I did not have the context. I did not have the religious depth. I didn't have the knowledge to understand why it was wrong, but something deep inside me said, no, this is wrong. At the same time, I grew up in what's now a suburb, but then was a rural area. The woods were quite literally 20 feet outside my back door. And the woods were my refuge. I loved nothing more than wandering through the woods, exploring the trees and the hills and the creek and looking for animals and trying to find the source of the creek, which was wet weather drainage, but because of the lay of the land at the time, it was running most of the time. The woods were a magical place. There's experiences I had that I look back on now, and I didn't have the context for them. Times when I got lost and then found myself someplace I had no business being. Was that just getting lost and finally finding myself later, or did I wander through? Did I step into the other world? I wonder about these things these days. I had no context for that then. As a young adult, I tried to be a good Christian because that's all I knew. I moved out of the Baptist church, went to a mainline Protestant church. It was okay, but it just didn't fit what I wanted. It didn't speak to me. I had always had an interest in magic, but of course, magic's not real. And then I met a Wiccan for the first time and learned about Wicca. And this was what I was looking for. Here's a religion that reveres nature. Here's a religion that says there's a goddess as well as a god. Here's a religion that isn't all about fear and damnation and all that stuff. And I tried to be a Wiccan, and it didn't speak to me either. Now, part of that was because, again, ultimately, Druidry is the path that I'm called to, and I hadn't found that yet. Part of it, though, was that I had not dealt with the baggage from my fundamentalist upbringing. And I dabbled in Wicca for 8 years and got nowhere. And one night, Thanksgiving night 2001, I had an epiphany. And it was like some goddess smacked me upside the head and said, either get serious or move on. And I knew that if I moved on, I would go back to some form of liberal Christianity, and that would be nice and weak for the rest of my life. I would never have the spiritual depth and spiritual power I was looking for. The powerful spiritual life. I got serious. I started reading. I went back and read some books on Christianity, learned some of the Christian history that they didn't teach me in Sunday school. I read some liberal Christian theologians. I read Buddhism. I read Joseph Campbell. The local PBS station was running their pledge drive, and they ran The Power of Myth over and over and over and over again. I have some issues with Joseph Campbell now, but at the time, that was exactly what I needed to hear. I started meditating. I found a book on Druidry, and when I read it, it was, that's it, that's me, that's who I'm supposed to be. And I started working in, I started reading more books on Druidry, trying to begin a Druid practice. I did this for a year working as a solitary. And after a year, I realized I had gone as far as I could go on my own. If I was going to go any further, I needed a group. Well, I'm here in metropolitan Dallas, Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area. At the time, there were no Druid groves of any order anywhere in North Texas. I didn't want a Wiccan coven. Somewhere in my reading, I had come across CUUPS, the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans. That sounded like a safe place to start. I got on the internet, and there were at the time 2 CUUPS groups relatively close to me. One down in Plano, it was actually a little closer, and one a little further away in Denton. Denton CUUPS had a slightly better website. They looked like they were doing more. I said, okay, I'm going to try that one out first, but I want to see them both, and then we'll make a decision. Well, I went to Denton CUUPS for Imbolc 2003, and I never left. Within about 6 weeks, I had joined. Later that year, I was elected an officer, started leading rituals, really went in, dove straight in the deep end, and we'll figure out how to swim along the way. I had been go ahead.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to ask more about the CUUPS. It's the Covenant of the Unitarian Universalist Pagans, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And you found your way there through a pretty clear path, it sounds like, starting it with Wicca, which is a common gateway drug for most pagans, and then going on into finding Druidry. You mentioned a book on Druidry. Do you remember what that book was?
Let me look at my bookshelf, and I will tell you. Let me see if my cord's long enough. The Druids by Jean Marcal. I think I'm pronouncing that right. He's French. I don't agree with everything in the book. In fact, some of it I think he's flat out wrong, but it got my attention. And that's what I needed.
Usually it's that one spark, that sort of inspiration that comes along. It's not, it doesn't seem to ever be in the most perfect, suitable form. It's just enough to nudge us into the right direction.
It really was. So I had been in CUUPS for about a year. I had been elected an officer. I knew I needed some formal training. I identified as a Druid. I wanted Druid training. I looked into ADF. I looked into OBOD. In fall of 2004, OBOD's distance learning program was vastly superior to ADF's. ADF's is much better than it used to be. OBOD's is still the best in the world for a distance learning program. I signed up for the OBOD course. Worked through the Bardic grade in 15 months. Then Ovate and then Druid. Completed the Druid grade in 2010. Started blogging in 2008 because I had some religious issues I wanted to discuss and couldn't always find the live local conversation, so I figured I'd get some conversation on the internet, and I didn't. But I got to where I liked writing, and the blog gradually grew. Started out on Blogger with very few readers, and gradually built up a bit of a readership. Was asked to move to Pathos at the beginning of 2013. Moved my blog there, and traffic just exploded after that. I had built up a bit of an audience, and the being connected with Pathos, the largest multi-faith religious website in the world, just helped bring more people in. And I've been there since 2013. Let's see, where am I now? I am the again completed the Druid grade in OBOD in 2010. I finally joined ADF a couple of years ago. I'm not doing their dedicant program. I would love to, but I just don't have the time. But I keep getting invited to ADF events, and I figure if I'm going to go to their events, and I really do like a lot of the things ADF does, I might as well join the organization and support it. Then, first book came out just a couple of weeks ago, The Path of Paganism, an experience-based guide to modern pagan religion, published by Llewellyn. It took about 3 years to make the book, between writing and editing some more, and finding somebody to publish it, and then working with their editors and their whole bookmaking process. And it came out. It was due out yesterday, but came out a couple of weeks early. So in about 12 minutes, that's how I went from a little boy in the woods in Tennessee to a druid and an author.
That's quite a journey, my friend. Yeah,
it took a while.
Let's back up a little bit. You tried to get away with a 12-minute interview. I don't know what TV show's on you're rushing to, but you're not going to see it.
Not tonight.
Yeah. All the way back to when you were making that change. Let's say you probably got into Wicca at this point. You may have read the book on Druidry, but somewhere along the way, there's something you may have experienced that you thought was really hard about making that change from a Christian upbringing to a more pagan worldview. What was it that you would have thought was the hardest thing to do, making that change?
Exercising the tentacles of fundamentalism from my consciousness. Let me explain. When you are taught from as far back as you can remember that the saved are going to heaven and the lost are going to hell, that doesn't just leave you because you decide to stop believing in it. Beliefs that are formed early on are deep-seated. I believe it's the Jesuits who say, "Give us the child until he is 7, and they will give you the man."
I think it's really important that you touched on the beliefs that get instilled when we're young, and now you've become more of a man of your own, and you're seeking your own spiritual path in life. And yet here are these ideas in your head that feel very oppressive.
Exactly.
And you had to remove those, as you call them, the tentacles of fundamentalism. And I promise you are far from the only one out there who had to deal with that. I was lucky. I wasn't raised Christian. I wasn't raised to be anything at all. I explored my own curiosity, and I met some very cool people along the way. I was very lucky. I didn't have to wrestle with those ideas, although you still run into them in our society at large. They were never really deeply instilled in me. But, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of current pagans or people beginning their first step into modern paganism who are dealing with those same things. So, what was it that you did to rid yourself of those? What advice could you give them?
Well, the first thing was to tear down the intellectual underpinnings of Christian fundamentalism. Fortunately, that is not difficult. Christian fundamentalism is based on a literal reading of the Bible. Evolution disproves that. The age of the earth disproves that. Some biblical archaeology disproves that. Now, it's not all made up. There's the whole Society for Biblical Archaeology, and you will find things that are referenced in the Bible for which there is archaeological evidence, because it's not all made up stories. There is real history in there, but the Bible is a collection of writings by and for a particular group of people in a particular place and time. So the first step was to tear down the intellectual underpinnings of fundamentalism, and that's not hard. The second part was to build a foundation to replace it, and that's one of the main themes of my book. Is building a new foundation, building a pagan foundation, building a foundation that says science isn't always right, but science is right when it says the universe is 14 billion years old. When it says the Earth is 4 billion years old. When it says that life began once on Earth, and every living thing on this planet has a common ancestor somewhere back in hundreds of millions of years ago. The next thing was to read a lot of world religions. Again, I read Buddhism. I read some Shinto. I read a little bit of Islam, a little bit of Judaism. Understanding that different groups of people in different parts of the world have approached the big questions of life differently, and they've come up with answers that work for them. That builds an intellectual foundation for a positive, life-affirming religion. But that doesn't get rid of those tentacles buried in your subconscious, the things that whisper to you in the middle of the night, but what if you're wrong? But what if you're wrong? If you're wrong, you're going to hell. That doesn't go away just because you decide to stop believing in it. That, in order to get rid of that, it had to be crowded out by a good religious experience. The first one of those was my first pagan initiation. The details are oath-bound, and I will respect that oath. I will say that when the initiation, when the act of initiation was over, and the investiture was begun, where I am now welcomed into this new status as a pagan. I forget the words we used, but when the priestess put her hands on me, I felt something, and it felt right, and those tentacles got shaken loose.
How was that experience different from what you might have expected going in?
I had no expectations going in. I had hopes. I expected that I was going to. My expectation was that I was going to make some oaths and have some experiences, and further take another step down this path that I really wanted to go down. This is my choice. This is my chosen path. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this step, and this is one way to do it. And I knew the priestess who was doing this work, she's got some magic. And I knew that I thought there might be something. I didn't expect this. And it wasn't all her. She was the conduit. It was strong. It was powerful. It was real. And it felt right. That was a big help. It didn't get rid of everything. Again, those tentacles that get sunk in at an early age take a long, long, long time to get out. A couple years later, a small group of us we wanted to do an ecstatic ritual. We wanted to invite a deity into our circle, and I volunteered to be the vessel for that. And I can still remember the beautiful spring night, warm, full moon out, just enough wind that you could feel it, just an absolutely magical night. And we invoked Cernunnos. And he came into me. And I felt the presence of a god inside me. And that was hard. When I hear some fundamentalists and some Catholics talk about the risks of demon possession, I can barely let a god get in when I want the god to get in. I have to work to relax and turn off my analytical mind and quit analyzing everything and be open to a spiritual presence. It's work. I can't imagine something that I didn't want coming in. This came in. This was the Lord of the animals, the God of the forest, and it was good. And it was real. And that shook the tentacles of fundamentalism a whole lot more loose. And after that, there wasn't a whole lot left. It popped up from time to time, but I was so busy with pagan work, both in terms of writing and leading rituals and doing all those things, but also my daily spiritual practice of prayer and meditation and saluting the sun and following the moon, and I didn't have any more room for it. And eventually it became like one of the spiritual, I won't even call it spirituals, the energetic signatures of the dead you see on some of these ghost hunting shows. Not that I'm a big fan of those, but where there's, for lack of a better word, psychic remnants of something that used to be. It's there. It keeps repeating itself, but it's dying. It has no energy. It doesn't have any more power over me anymore. And that took a very long time. It took a lot of work. It took building a good intellectual foundation. It took conscious steps along a path. And most of all, it took having emotional, religious experiences to crowd out all those bad experiences.
It sounds like the perfect combination of events to rid yourself of prior ideas and beliefs, and each and every new experience can help do exactly that.
It does, and it's again, we're talking about this in a few minutes, and this took years and years and years. And if somebody who's listening to this is in that situation, it can be done. And there is, again, part of the reason I wrote this book was to talk about some of those foundational things you can do to move yourself along. I've got a blog post somewhere about how I escaped fundamentalism. Taking this conversation, cutting it down to about 1,500 words. And if you're in that situation, go look that up. Because nobody should have to live with what I had to live with.
I absolutely agree. In fact, for anyone out there who isn't familiar with John's blog, we'll make sure that you get links in the show notes, and we'll talk about it here at the end of the show. But you can go to the archives by month, and if you go to December of each year in his archives, you'll find 2 posts right away. One will be the top 10 posts from this year, and the other one will be the top posts that you didn't read. I recommend starting there.
Thank you. That is a good place. But I'll find that post on escaping fundamentalism, and so you can put that one specifically in the notes.
Oh, thank you. That'd be a great link to include in the notes. Now, you talk a lot about the gods. You are quite open and clear that the gods are a huge part of your practice. And I'm curious, in the dedication of your book, as an example, if you don't mind my reading it.
Oh, please.
And as a heathen reading some Celtic god names, please forgive my pronunciation. You can correct me when I'm done. The Path of Paganism is dedicated to Brigid, who wanted this book written. It's dedicated to the Morrigan, who reminded me that my time is not unlimited. It's dedicated to Danu, who had been a steadying presence in my life since I started on this pagan path. And it is dedicated to Cernunnos, Lord of the animals and God of the forest, who protected me from afar when I was young, and who now challenges me to be the best druid and priest I can be. Now that's an awful lot of communication from some very interesting gods and goddesses. How do you know they were talking to you, John?
The engineer in me says I don't. If I have to convince an atheist that a God is speaking to me, I'll never do it. Here's what I know. When I am in meditation, when I'm in prayer, I hear things, not with my ears. Things pop into my head that don't belong there. Things that aren't me. Synchronicities happen that are, they could be random, but they happen so many times. It's the idea of them simply being random. It just is hard. It's harder for me to believe these days. I spoke to the gods. They answered. The best example I can give is my story of the Morrigan. I first met the Morrigan in August of 2004 when Denton CUUPS was doing a Lunisad circle. We wanted an appropriate goddess. We found an ADF ritual that had honored Morrigan as goddess of sovereignty alongside of Lu, and we copied that. And that's where I learned a little about who she was. Fast forward a few years, and I had a friend who was in trouble in another part of the country. I couldn't go help her. And I prayed. I said, Morrigan, please help my friend. My friend was okay. About 3 weeks later, the same thing happened with another friend. And I prayed, Morrigan, please help my friend. And my friend was okay. About 2 weeks after that, same thing. And I prayed to the Morrigan, please help my friend. My friend was okay. And I heard in the back of my head, I have done this for you. Now I want you to do some things for me. And that started has remained an active relationship of things that I needed to write, stories that I needed to tell, messages I needed to deliver, people I needed to talk to. Now, can I prove to an atheist that that's not all in my head? Nah, can't do it. But here's what I know. My life is better since I have been following these gods. They bring meaning to my life. They allow me to be a part of something that's bigger than myself. They have brought me experiences that are so strong. I no longer doubt the reality of the gods. I've experienced too much. And again, nothing I can prove to an atheist, but I'm convinced this is true. And so are some other people. And so were many of our pre-Christian ancestors. And it works. And because it works, because it makes my life better, I order my life as though it was absolutely true, even though I can't be sure from an objective standpoint.
How do you respond when we hear so many of our fellow pagans say, I was called by, insert a god's name here, or I felt their presence, or I just know they were talking to me? And, they may be fairly new. They could be intermediate or advanced people. But I notice I hear this a lot from the newer people coming into paganism. And it's something that's like that was their inspiring nudge to get them to explore this spiritual path a little bit more. But, I mean, as a Druid priest yourself, how do you respond to someone who says, I feel like I'm being called by the Morrigan, and they've got no real knowledge of what the Morrigan is? How do you handle that situation?
carefully and respectfully. I do my best to never question the reality of someone's religious experience. They heard something. They felt something. Now, was that the Morrigan? I don't know. She's quite active these days. She's been quite active for the last 7 years. She's quite active. She has called a lot of people. Not all of them are knowledgeable pagans. Some of them she's grabbed, and they didn't know who. They literally did not know what hit them. If someone says, I don't know who this Morrigan person is, but they're bothering me, my default answer is to believe them and go from there. Now, we live in a culture that is nominally Christian. It is highly materialistic. It is influenced by science fiction and fantasy. People don't have a context for a polytheist experience. They don't have the context to know what it means when a deity taps them on the shoulder. We don't grow up learning that in our world. And people respond with the context that they have, whether that is mythology or psychology or Harry Potter. And I love the Harry Potter books, but they are fiction. So when somebody says, I think the Morrigan is calling me, I'm going to ask, why? What makes you think that? Well, I'm seeing a lot of crows. Well, do crows live where you are? Sometimes crows, when you see a crow, it's just a crow doing crow things. Yeah, but I'm seeing them all the time in places they never are. Well, okay, that's starting to make sense. What kind of message are you? Well, it's just about I need to stand up for myself. I need to start finding other people in my community. That sounds like her, and you start to piece together a story that tells you that, again, I can't be sure. I can't prove it to the satisfaction of an atheist, but what this person is describing is in alignment with my own experiences and with the experiences of other people who have had similar experiences with the Morrigan. So in that case, I'm going to recommend some books for them to read. I'm going to recommend some prayers and offerings to make. I'm going to suggest that they talk about it with some people who've been through these things before. I may put them in touch with one of the priests of the Morrigan I know. I'll take them seriously as long as they're showing that they're serious. Now, occasionally you get somebody who is clearly occasionally I come across someone who, while I do not deny the reality of their experience, I seriously question their interpretation of their experience. And I try to be gentle, and I try to be kind, and I try to point them toward helpful resources, but I don't spend a lot of time with them.
Well, it seems like a good approach. I like that you treat them with respect. I know from experience sometimes that can be challenging. And other times it's almost awe-inspiring to see someone so filled with this sudden burst of knowledge of something so much greater, and they don't know where it came from. And you get every experience in between. Now, we've thrown around a title a couple times here between us because we're familiar with it, but I think a lot of our listeners may not be, and that is Druid. Now, I'm also a member of the ADF, and I see in the ADF forums, there's even amongst us in our membership a debate that will come up every once in a while on whether or not we even can call ourselves Druids. So, what is a Druid to you? How would you define it?
Ronald Hutton, the historian who wrote Triumph of the Moon about the origins of Wicca, has a book. Which one is it that it's just called The Druids, and in his book he says that what we know about the ancient Druids could fill about a dozen pages of very large type, and that's it. We don't know much about the ancient Druids. We know they existed. We know they were the priests and judges and advisors of the ancient Celtic world. And that's about all we know. Now, because we know so little about them, as Hutton points out, they are a bit of a blank slate. And over the centuries, people have impressed upon Druids whatever they wanted them to be. So in some cases, they were the bloodthirsty savages who practiced human sacrifice, because that's what the people at the time wanted the ancient Celts to be. Other times they've been gentle priests of nature. Other times they have been workers for social justice. Other times they've been seen as wizards. All of these things go into what people think of when you say Druid. I am inspired by what we know about the ancient Druids, no matter how small that is. The idea that these were the priests, they were the healers, they were the advisors, they were the keepers of records and lore for the ancient Celtic societies. And if those were their functions, now one of the things I mentioned, the book by Markel, he says there can be no modern Druids because to be a Druid requires a Celtic society, and we no longer have those. Well, I don't see it that way, because the way I look at it, let's assume that Christianity never came to the British Isles. Let's assume that it was not replaced by that its place wasn't filled by Islam or Buddhism or anything like that. Let's assume that Britain and Ireland remained pagan as they were before the coming of the Romans. Well, today, are you going to see the Prime Minister of Great Britain waiting to speak until the chief Druid opens Parliament? Probably not. Are you going to go see a Druid if you've got the flu and you need or a broken leg and you need medical care? Probably not. We're going to have modern medicine anyway. The Druids would have evolved along with the rest of society. And if the Druids would have evolved, who's to say that what we do might not be that far from what they would be doing? More importantly, somebody called those ancient Druids all those centuries ago. Some gods called the Druids. Some land spirits called the Druids. Some ancestors called the Druids. They called them out of the population to be what they were. I think it is highly likely that those same gods and ancestors and spirits have called the modern Druids to do what we do. And if you talk to Christopher Hughes, who's head of the Anglesey Druid Order, that really starts to resonate, because Anglesey was the seat of Druidry during ancient times until the Romans wiped them out in 63 CE. The same land that spoke to Chris's ancestors speaks to him. So, can we call ourselves Druids? Of course we can. People have done it for hundreds of years in the modern era. Do we have a direct connection to the ancients? No, clearly not. There's a 1,000-year gap in Druidry. But the same spirits, the same forces that inspired the ancient Druids can inspire us, and they do.
Well said. I agree. Yeah, those same spirits and those gods, the ancestors, they surely have whispered into the ears of many a people along the way to get something revived and rebuilt. Now, you mentioned something in your description that is a common topic that comes up as either morbid curiosity or an outright accusation of why would you want to be involved in anything pagan. And that was how ancients practiced human sacrifice. How do you deal with that kind of criticism?
The charge of human sacrifice was leveled by Julius Caesar, who wanted to portray the ancient Britons as barbarians in need of Roman civilization. This is the same Roman civilization that gave us the arena and crucifixion. The ancient world was a brutal place. Rome was among the most brutal, despite their intellectual and engineering and military achievements. Did the Celts practice human sacrifice? Probably. There's too many of the bog bodies that have been found bear the signs of a ritual sacrifice. It's what people did. That doesn't negate everything else they did. It is a practice from antiquity and before antiquity that we no longer practice today.
Well, I might suggest that death row inmates may disagree that we don't practice that anymore.
That's a fair point. And those who find themselves arguing against Druids or pagans in general, they practice human sacrifice, should take a look on the death rows of Texas and Florida and some other places.
That's correct. There are many states and countries at large, but right here in the United States, who still sacrifice humans in the name of justice and higher ideals.
Yep.
That I don't care to participate in any such practice. Nope. For the record.
There are people who deserve to die, but we don't. But the people do not deserve to be their killers.
With that said, there has always been a practice of some form of sacrifice or offerings made in the name of religion, especially within Druidry and paganism. How does that practice take shape today?
Sacrifice. There are two meanings to the word sacrifice. The one we usually think of is to give up. In baseball, you have the sacrifice bunt where the batter gives himself up, makes an out to advance the runner. We talk about making sacrifices when we want something. We'll sacrifice. We'll sacrifice our time so that that we can work on a project that's important to us. We make sacrifices of money when we give to religious organizations, to charities, and to other groups that we believe in. We talk about sacrifice as in giving up. Sacrifice has another meaning, and that is to make sacred. When we give something to the gods, we make it sacred. Sacrifice reminds us that there's dirty work out there that has to be done, and somebody has to do it. Sacrifice reminds us that there's something more important than ourselves. And again, things that it is worthwhile to give up. Now, the vast majority of modern pagan sacrifices are of food and drink. I do not practice animal sacrifice. I know some people who do. They have taken great care to learn the craft to do it right. If you eat meat, I don't want to hear about how brutal sacrifice is, because the animals that I know that have been sacrificed had a far better life and a far easier death than the cow that went into making your hamburger. If you're going to make animal sacrifices, you better learn to do it right. I live in a suburb. It wouldn't go over well with my neighbors. The gods have not asked me to do that, and so I have not. But I pour libations on a regular basis. I make food offerings on a regular basis. I make other offerings as I'm asked to make them. By offering them to the gods, we make them sacred. By giving to the gods, we are reminded that we're reminded of the principle of reciprocity. We give to the gods so that they can give to us, so we can give to them again. The world runs on reciprocity. I give so that you may give. Sacrifice. If I would emphasize the point though that sacrificing something is making it sacred, and that's a good thing and a necessary thing.
Agreed. That's the definition of sacrifice I think most of us live with today. Although, as a rabid Chicago Cubs fan, I appreciate a good sacrifice bunt from time to time too. Something else that you write on a lot, and I think it's starting to finally become more understood within modern paganism, is animism.
Yes.
And what is it about animism exactly as an approach that makes it matter so much, and how does that actually manifest itself in your daily life?
Animism is one of the foundational principles of a pagan and polytheist worldview. Animism isn't part of paganism or polytheism necessarily. It's part of mine. Animism is the idea that everything is not a thing. Everything is a person. Whatever is it that animates you and me and the cat and the squirrels also animates the rocks and trees and rivers and lakes. Maybe everything has a spirit. Maybe everything is a spirit and manifests in a physical way. Maybe neither one of those is true, but they are still persons. And what that means is that we treat other persons with dignity and respect. We respect their sovereignty, their right to live, their right to live their lives the way that they're called to live them without undue interference. We respect them as persons and not as things that are here for us to exploit. The forest is a living being. It is not simply a collection of trees that we can turn into houses and paper. Doesn't mean we can't cut trees occasionally. It does mean that that's a sacred act. That's a sacrifice you're making. Animism reminds us that whatever our place in the world is, it's not at the head of the table. The monotheist worldview says that God created humans slightly below him, and the earth is here to support humans and for our enjoyment, and it's here for us to do with as we please, or some more reasonable monotheists say that it's here for us to manage for the Creator. But regardless, the earth is just here for us, and all the animals are here for us, and the plants are here for us, and they're here for us to do with what we want to. Animism says no. the forest has as much right to exist as you do. You have a place in this world, but it's not at the head of the table. It's out in the middle of things with everybody else, with all the other persons, with the rabbit persons and the buffalo persons and the oak tree persons and the river persons. And we treat these other persons with dignity and respect, and not as things that are here for us to exploit.
Good answer. And I think it gets tricky sometimes when you give animism deeper thought.
It really does, and some of the things I've written here lately explore some of those troubling questions, because we have to kill to eat. Every animal lives by eating other living things. Whether they are plant persons or animal persons, we have to eat other life or we will die. How do we deal with that? Well, some religions have said, well, they're all just things and they were put here for our use, so, enjoy them. And that hasn't worked out so well. That's led to exploitation and pollution and climate change and species loss and the disconnection of humanity from the earth, which is one of the reasons paganism has returned as a religious outlook over the last 150 years or so, because people have been disconnected from the land. But again, we have to eat. We have to kill to eat. How do we deal with that? And if you think of the wheat grain as a person, that gets difficult. And my answer to that is we do so with respect and with gratitude, and by making sure that, yes, we may cut down some of the wheat. We don't cut down all of the wheat. We may kill one deer to eat. We don't wipe out the whole species. Is that a satisfactory answer? It's an answer. But the answer that it's all just stuff for us to exploit has not gone well for us. And animism presents a radically different alternative, and one that I think is necessary for us as a species as we grow and evolve and try to keep from making the planet inhospitable to us, and as we look for different ways to relate to the other living beings with which we share this planet.
I think animism is an excellent philosophy, at the very least, to allow us to ask questions that provide better answers to live.
I agree with that.
Now, you've also written about what you call the last denominator paganism, and often advise against it. And that's a phrase that I use a lot myself. And in fact,
least common denominator paganism. Yes. The idea that we just take whatever it is we have in common, and we take a little bit of Wicca and a little bit of New Age and a little bit of environmentalism, and we run with that. And that's easy, and it's light, and it makes no demands on us, and it has no spiritual power. It doesn't change lives. It doesn't change the world. It doesn't bring great meaning. It doesn't challenge us to live in a way that is respectful to other beings. I try not to rant too much anymore, although I still do it occasionally. But yeah, I will go on a rant against least common denominator paganism.
Well, the most common word you use in response to that idea, and whenever you do, as you call it, go on a rant, I say it's fair, and I wouldn't call it a rant at all. It's stating what needs to be said, is authenticity. you use that word as a shield against least common denominator paganism. So, I mean, when you do that, how do you define authentic and how do you recognize it?
That's a good question. I'm not a Wiccan. I tried to be a Wiccan. I couldn't be a Wiccan. There's nothing wrong with Wicca as a religion, as a spiritual practice. If you want to be a Wiccan, be a Wiccan. Go find a Gardnerian coven. Go find an Alexandrian coven. Do your year and a day dedication. Do all the things that Wiccans do. Be an authentic Wiccan. Don't take a little bit of Wicca and a little bit of Druidry and a little bit of Buddhism and mix it all together and call it whatever you want to call it. Be an authentic Wiccan. You want to be a Druid? Join ADF. Join OBOD. Join AODA. Pick up a handful of books on Druidry and start figuring out your own way to be a Druid. But follow in that tradition with the ancient Druids as our models and our inspiration, and in the light of the revival Druids over the last 300 years, all the way up through Isaac Bonowitz and Philip Carr-Gomm and John Michael Greer and those folks. You want to be a heathen? Be a heathen. Worship the Norse gods. Worship the Anglo-Saxon gods. Whatever you do, dive deeply into that. Don't try to sample a little here and a little there and mix it all together because you like eating at the spiritual buffet.
Thank you. I am a heathen. I will be a heathen. Now, something in the current internet blogosphere of paganism in the last few months since Donald Trump has become president has gathered even your attention on your blog. And that was a recent movement by witches and pagans of all types to bind Donald Trump. And you expressed a different opinion on how to use such powers and called the movement a poor use of our time and our energy. Now, what I'm wondering, and I tend to side with you on this matter, in general, what is the better approach to challenge the powers that control our society from a more magical perspective?
At the risk of being called a libertarian, and I have nothing against libertarians, I'm much more liberal and socialist leaning, but at the risk of being called a libertarian, make government irrelevant. I am horrified at the idea of Donald Trump as president. I voted for Hillary Clinton, but the truth of the matter is a lot of things would be the same had she been elected. It would be a lot less embarrassing, and that's worth something. But the empire would continue. This was one of the themes of Denton CUUPS Beltane ritual last Saturday. Was we're living in troubled times. We're living in times when we have politicians who are who want to be dictators. When the police shoot young black men because they feel like it. When corporations rape the environment and use workers until they don't need them anymore and then cast them away like used socks. This is not a nice world we're living in. The political and economic environment that we're living in is not a good place. I have people who I respect who believe we can change that. I'm not sure we can, and certainly not in the time that I have left in this life. Not that I'm planning to check out anytime soon. What we can do is to make all of them irrelevant. We can live our lives the way we're called to live them. We can honor our gods and ancestors. We can do our best to live in harmony with the earth. We can treat all our neighbors with dignity and respect. We can live the way that we want other people to live. We can form our own tribes. This is so important. We're not going to get through this alone. We're going to have the help. We're going to have to support each other. The people at the local mega church aren't particularly interested in what the local druid is doing, but my local pagan friends are. If I need help, I can call them and they'll come. And if they call me, I'll go to their side as quickly as I can. We can care for each other. We can care for our elders. We can look in on them. We can give them rides. We can make sure that that they're doing all right. We live the way we want to live. We live the way we're called to live. We show the rest of society a better way. We build our own communities. We build some resilience in so that if things get worse, and they very well may, we can handle it. We cannot do this alone. And as much as I love my pagan friends around the country, if I'm sick and need a ride to the doctor, my friends in California can't do much for me. But my local friends can. We need local communities. And there is such a strong current of hyper-individualism in modern paganism. Such a strong idea of you can't tell me what to do, of what's in it for me, and that's not going to be helpful as we move forward through these difficult times. We've got to look out for each other. I'm a druid, you're a heathen. We probably agree on a lot of things. There's some stuff we don't agree on. There's some of your worship services where I might not be comfortable. There's some of the things I do where you might not be comfortable. We don't have to water down our heathenry and our druidry to so we're all worshiping together. We just have to look out for each other. We have to support each other. We have to have each other's backs. If we do that, we're going to get by okay. Maybe not as well as we'd like to, but we'll get by okay because we'll take care of each other. We'll support each other. We'll build our communities and we'll build our religions as we're doing that. If we try to go it alone, it's not going to be pretty.
What would you advise others out there to begin building those local communities, to cross, the barriers between even the walls within modern paganism? We don't, like you said, I'm a heathen, you're a druid. Although to be fair, I kind of walk in both worlds, so I might like more of your stuff than you like of mine. How would you build a community if you were starting over again?
It takes a commitment to building a community. It takes a commitment to doing what is best for the group and not necessarily what is doing best for you as an individual. That's very difficult for us as 21st century Americans, where we're taught that it's all about us. It isn't. That's one thing heathenry does well in general, is to put the community and the tribe ahead of the individual. The Hellenists do that fairly well. The generic pagans, not so well. Something the rest of us need to learn from. But find a local group. Find a healthy local group. Set some standards. You get the kind of behavior you tolerate. Denton CUUPS has, we're a UU Pagan group. We take all comers, but we don't feed drama, and so drama doesn't stick around. We don't always agree. Sometimes we really don't agree. Sometimes we have different priorities and different things, and we get upset with each other. But we're committed to the group because we know we need the group, and because we're called to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. When a god tells you to gather your tribe, that means something. And it gives you a little motivation to put up with some quirks from some people that you may find a little annoying, but they mean well and they contribute their share, and so you put up with it, and they put up with you. Because you're committed to the group, you're committed to building a community, you're committed to doing the work of the gods, to supporting nature, to honoring the ancestors, and building a good, positive community that's going to help us all get through these tough times.
Yeah, we've covered some ground to express what is very frustrating sometimes within paganism, and we've certainly covered ground to cover what's good about paganism. I want to go one step further. What is it that you see in modern paganism you would call controversial?
Well, anything can be controversial. The things that I see that troubles me is the insistence from some on ideological purity. If you don't support my politics, I'm not going to have anything to do with you. If you have anything to do with politics, I'm not going to have anything to do with you. If you don't agree that my beliefs are the same as yours, I don't want to have anything to do with you. This idea that we all have to think alike in order to work alike is dysfunctional. It will be the death of the pagan community. We can disagree and still respect each other and still work together where we do agree. If your gods are calling you to be marching in the streets, go. I respect that. That's not my calling. If your gods are calling you to work in a hospital and take care of the sick, and you don't want to think about politics, you do that. That's your calling. You do what you're called to do. But when it comes time to get together to celebrate Beltane, to work together for religious liberty, to work together for to take care of the earth. Let's come together around the things that we do, where we do agree, and not kill each other over the things where we don't agree.
Fair enough. I like it. I've seen that a lot myself. If you don't agree with me, we can't be friends. If you don't agree with my politics, then you're the bad guy. And it happens a little too quick and a little too fast, and it's killing conversation.
It is.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I really hope that whatever it is that's driving that force ends sooner than later. Well, we are getting heavy on the clock here. So I want to make sure you get a chance to talk about your book, John. So tell us, why should the beginning pagan buy The Path of Paganism by one John Beckett?
This book was written for people who have, maybe you've read a book or two, you've been to a circle or two, you like what you see. You want to build a good, solid religious practice. This book will help you build a solid foundation, of spiritual practice. It makes a reasonable case for paganism. It helps provide an intellectual foundation. It walks you through some of the foundational pagan practices and the things you can do to make this more real to you. It gives priority to experience, because we in this country, in this culture, we have the idea that religion is about what you believe. But for most people in most of the world throughout most of history, religion is not about what you believe. It's about who you are, whose you are, and what you do. And when you do things, when you practice paganism, you begin to have pagan experiences, and out of those experiences you form beliefs, and because you have beliefs, you continue practicing, which brings about more experiences and more thoughts about bring more beliefs. You have a nice virtuous circle there between practice, experience, and belief. And religious experience is the foundation of all good religion. What is it that you do? What is it that you experience? What is it that you experience out there under the full moon? What is it that you experience when you're in prayer to your gods? What is it that you experience when your ancestor pops into the back of your head and tells you something that you otherwise wouldn't know? This forms a foundation for practice. You do this for a while, you start to get good at it, you start to get comfortable with it. What's the next step? Well, the next step is into intermediate practice. And that's one of the things where there are far too few books in paganism on intermediate practice. This is one of them. What do you do when you're ready for the next thing? It talks about how you can take your practice on to make it deeper, to make it more meaningful, to learn and grow, to strengthen that religious foundation. And then at the very end, it challenges you to move on even beyond that. So it's about foundations, it's about experience, it's about moving beyond the basics.
Now, where can everybody find you and your book?
The book is available from, you can order it direct from the publisher, Llewellyn. You can order it from Amazon. You can order it from Barnes & Noble. I don't know if it's in stores or not. I tend to doubt it, but you can order it from any of those three sources.
Well, it sounds like a scavenger hunt. So for any of those listeners out there who spot John's book, The Path of Paganism, in a bookstore, send a picture to me at weirdwebradio.com or tweet it to me at weirdwebradio, and I'll give you a free tarot reading. Just to the first one.
That would be wonderful. If you get any, please pass them along.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. So everybody out there, get your scavenger shoes on and go find John's book in a bookstore. Well, John, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you, and I've got a lot more questions, but I know that you have some things that you need to do, and of course I do too. So with any luck, I hope that I can get you back on the show again.
I'd love to.
Good. Now, before we go, do you have any parting thoughts to share with anyone? Something we haven't covered?
Just if you're just talk a little bit about where I'm going to be. I will be at the next place I'll be will be May 20th. Saturday, May 20th, will be at the DFW Pagan Unity Fest at the Arlington UU Church. In July, I will be at Mystic South, the new Pagan conference in Atlanta. In August, I will be at Beyond the Gates. It's an ADF retreat in Washington State. And then in September, I will be at the Southern New Hampshire Pagan Pride Day. So 4 events in 4 different parts of the country where if you're around those, come out and say hello.
Sounds good. So everybody, if you've got a chance to get out there and meet John, it'd be a good time to do it. Thank you again for being on the show, John. It's been an incredible honor and a pleasure to talk to you, to pick your brain, and to hear the wisdom that you are sharing with me and the audience out there. Thank you to all my listeners and subscribers to Weird Web Radio. You can find the show at weirdwebradio.com and weirdwebradio.libsyn.com. I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/weirdwebradio and Twitter @weirdwebradio. You can subscribe by email here on weirdwebradio.com in your favorite podcast apps and in iTunes. Just search for us by name as Weird Web Radio. Please remember to rate, comment, and share the shows you like. It helps others find us in the search results. Seek the mysteries and delights in life, my friends, and as always, stay weird out there.